Hello, and welcome to Powerful Places Podcasts. I'm your host, Gary White, and today we will hear a conversation I had with Elyn about her novel, The Journey, and how she wrote it. This podcast is available either in audio form or with video, so take your pick and let's get started. A reader of your novel, The Journey, recently asked the following question: how much of you and your personal life experience is in the journey?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me preface this by saying I just reread The Journey after having not read it for some time. And it read like somebody else's novel. It was fascinating. I didn't know what was going to happen. And then I tried to remember, well, how much of this was mine and how much of it wasn't. I can start by saying that all of the locations, the places, a number even of the, certainly in Brocéliande in Brittany, the relais where we stay, all of these things exist. These are places we have spent time in, we have traveled to. We spent a lot of time in Brittany. I've walked the Camino de Santiago, so that experience of knowing pilgrims and walking and getting to Santiago is mine. I've been in Turkey several times, so what I describe there are things I've seen. But I'm not Gwen. I am not the heroine in this novel. When I first walked the Camino de Santiago and arrived there in 1982, I was sorely disappointed. It didn't have anything for me. And that's true. That is an experience that Gwen had. But her reasons for that experience are completely different. She felt she'd wasted her Camino. She was seeking for something and didn't find it. I knew the Camino had transformed me. But the cathedral and that sort of organized official Catholic Church end to the Camino didn't mean anything to me. I was surprised, and then I thought, well, why would it? So I guess the answer is the places, a lot of the information, all of that, yes. But Gwen is not me. I never studied. When I wrote this book, I had never studied with a Qabbalist. The very sort of Machiavellian Qabbalist teacher in the novel, I have never met. Not that I know of, anyway. I've never met Merlin, the Merlin figure. I've never met Lily, the exotic enchantress in Brocéliande, nor her partner Blaise. In fact, when they showed up in the book, I was going, whoa, where did these guys come from? When I was writing the manuscript, we lived in a house that had 4 levels, and my office was on the top level, and we had
An intercom system.
An intercom system.
Right.
And periodically I'd call Gary and I'd say, you'll never believe who just walked in the door.
Yes.
It was a fascinating experience.
Right. Your reader actually said at one point, perhaps Lily was someone from a previous life.
Yeah. Let me answer questions nobody's asked yet. This was a very strange experience writing this novel. I've written a lot of books. Many of them are travel narratives or about pilgrimage, the Camino. But this was a very strange experience. I knew I wanted to write something. I knew I wanted certain characters and that certain dates were important. And so Gary and I sat down and sort of worked out a very loose outline. And then I named some characters and I just had some general ideas and some events, like the doing something for October 31st, a Celtic ritual or a pseudo-Celtic ritual in the forests in Galicia, in northwestern Spain, near Santiago de Compostela. A quemada. I had seen something like that done in a hotel setting. Mm-hmm. And it does exist as a ritual in that area. But anyway, so there were certain things that kind of were names that were important. Jacob and Gwen for Guinevere, really. And some hints of Arthur and legends. And that was really just about it. Mm-hmm. And then I started writing. And I wrote most of this, how many pages is this? 400-page book. The first manuscript, I think I wrote in about a month.
I remember that very well, because I would cook some food and bring it up to you as you continued with your writing, and it was really nonstop.
I would just sort of sit down and go, I wonder what's going to come now, and I would just sit there, and it was really like sort of automatic writing might be in front of a computer, because I really had very little idea of what was going to happen.
Part of the structure of the book is this story that takes place in a previous time and a story that's taking place in the present, and that was planned in advance, I believe.
Yes.
I believe that we actually had...
So it's what you call a time slip novel in that regard,
yes.
Because there are these other characters in a different time, and they sort of interface and come into and out of Gwen's reality. And I didn't know what was going to happen with them either. So it was really, really quite an experience. Somebody once asked me, they said, gee, we didn't know you could read the tarot cards, because there's several important tarot readings, and Lily, this exotic creature in Brocéliande, is a tarot card reader. And when my friend said, well, we didn't know you could read the tarot, I said, well, I can't. I don't. And what I had done was...
I remember very well. We went out and bought the Rider-Waite deck.
Yeah.
And you laid out the cards.
And I did have some sort of intro, the Dummy's Guide to Tarot or something.
Right.
And so I'd lay out the card. I'd do the reading like I was Lily, or like I was Gwen later on when she's learned to read the cards. And then I'd go to a couple of sources and go, okay. And then I'd write up this reading. And it was eerie, because it was so accurate to what was going on when I didn't even know what was going on in this story.
The actual readings that are in the book are the layouts that you did with the cards.
Yeah.
It's amazing. There's more than coincidence in this book. We saw it happen later.
Yes.
Years later, actually.
Well, let's see. I wrote this in fall of
2001.
2001, right. And then in spring of 2002, we went back to Brocéliande, where we hadn't been for several years. This is northwestern France, in Brittany. It's this magical Arthurian kind of place. And we were with some friends, and Gary and our friends went into the Relais, this country inn where we'd stayed before, to arrange for rooms. And I went into the bar, and I started talking with this guy who spoke very little English, and my French is pretty bad. But we managed to communicate, and we made all this deep connection. And a very interesting guy whose pen name is Pierre Dubois, which is the stone of the woods.
Yes.
And he's actually, or at that point at least, he was an important TV personage told myths and stories and the legends, and there was a film crew with him because they were going to be filming him telling the legends of Brocéliande. And he also writes big coffee table-sized books on the little people, various kinds of fairies and elves and so forth. And he gave me a copy of one of his books in English the next day when we got together, and introduced me to somebody I needed to know, and so forth and so on. And the interesting thing was that then later, much later, because I put the manuscript away for some time, and when I came back to it a year or two later, and Gary looked at it again, he said, "Oh my God, the character I describe in the book as Taliesin looks exactly like Pierre Dubois."
She had described the costume,
oh yeah,
the appearance, everything about this
perfectly before I met him. And there's another character in the book, Terry, a sort of androgynous palm reader in Santiago de Compostela, and I met her too, or him, depending. Yeah, about 6 months later. So this was a very strange book. Gary and I were following a Sufi path. We were part of the Sufi Order International, which is a non-Muslim sort of mystical, esoteric order. And so towards the end, some of the Sufi connection material is stuff that I've lived, but I also have gone to seminary and have a master's in divinity. And so I draw upon a much broader background than just my own. But again, the quotes, the stories, the things that happen just kind of appeared and were absolutely the perfect thing. I was really amazed when I reread it. I thought, wow, I don't think I wrote that.
Well, it came through you. It's a novel of pilgrimage and spiritual quest, is what it says on the cover. Go to www.powerfulplaces.com or www.powerfulplaces.info to learn more about us, Elyn Aviva and Gary White, and our books.